First up, tell me a little bit about your organization and what you do.
Innovate Inclusion advocates for the entrepreneurial success of underrepresented communities. So we connect underrepresented communities with opportunities in business that focus on technology and entrepreneurship. And vice versa, we connect businesses or organizations with underrepresented communities.
What are some of the challenges in terms of getting investment dollars to these communities?
I would say the number one challenge for getting dollars to these communities is access. Whether it's the access to social capital, so being in the same room as some of the VCs or angels or whatever the case may be, or being in the programs or accelerators or incubators that prepare you or again give you the opportunities to pitch for some of these funds. And then just in general, I would say in terms of Canada, the lack of diversity in the investors themselves. So for example, we have a very huge first and second generation population. So many people come from different places around the world, and they might still have obligations or other financial ties, or a lack of opportunity in terms of not having generations here, so having an established family. So not having the access or the ability to raise friends and family rounds because their friends and family might not be as established or as affluent as others. So those would be, I think, the top supporting points or factors to the larger challenge of access.
How do you actually reach out to these individuals? How do you find them and make sure that they're aware of your organization and know that you're there to help them?
Honestly, the reach has been organic. I'm somewhat of a connector naturally, so I meet people in different walks of life. Was recently, or this weekend, was at Firesides, a really interesting camp, 4 days, where you actually get to interact with a number of different people, from journalists to VCs to other entrepreneurs, but it's just in the everyday walks of life. That was a very rare case, but literally it's every day. So whether it's in different community events, whether it's been through everyday life, being part of the incubators, but it's really an effort and a concerted effort to get out and meet people and understand and know that you might meet them today, and the connection might not fully develop until 5, 10, 15 years later.
What are some of the outcomes so far in terms of the work that your organization has done?
So the two major outcomes that we're most proud of are the Ontario Incubator Diversity Report, where we looked at 4 of the government-funded incubators, Communitech, DMZ, Mars, and Invest Ottawa, to evaluate the ethnic diversity of the board of directors, management team, as well as the entrepreneur-facing staff, to understand who's making the decisions, who's at the table, who's not at the table, and what does the programming look like, as well as speaking to the entrepreneurs from underrepresented communities to understand what are the needs, what are some of the challenges, so we can answer questions like, what are the elements preventing funding, and then making recommendations to facilitate solutions towards that. So the impetus or the purpose was not to chastise or to highlight shortcomings, but rather to identify opportunities and celebrate the fact that we do have the most diverse country in the world and that we are strong because of it. So how do we put that on a world stage? How do we start that by looking at Ontario and then amplifying that across the board? So that was the first one. The second was our Violence 360 campaign. We also are very community-centric, to your point about how do we find the different organizations. We were selected by the provincial government to deliver a violence prevention campaign. Most people would try or wonder what the connection is between violence prevention and technology or entrepreneurship. But if you look at some of the root causes of violence, often finances, socioeconomic status are one of them. So we delivered a campaign that leveraged social media or digital media. So that was a technology component to reach Black youth, the focus is Black youth, and get the message out about violence and how people in the community are affected from a 360 approach, but also looked at some of the other challenges. So once someone does go to prison, if they have committed a violent crime, what do they do when they get out if they're not fully employable? Entrepreneurship is often the number one or the best way for them to do that. And then with technology and us moving into the innovation economy, there's so many ways that you don't necessarily have to be employed by an organization. You can become a freelancer, you can do so many things, and just opening the community's eyes to that. So those are two things.
So you are clearly moving the dial for a number of different people. Who moved the dial for you? Who inspires you every day?
It's a bit cliche, but I would definitely say my mother. So immigrated to Canada over 40 years ago, and we come from a matrilineal community, so our family is Ghanaian, and women play a large role in terms of society, culture, and even just the family itself. So her raising 3 daughters who are quite accomplished, I have 2 great sisters, and seeing her as an example living in this country, like I can't live more than an hour away from my mom, let alone she moved across an ocean and was, without her family. So seeing the dignity, the class, the confidence that she instilled in us, like seeing someone like Serena Williams, in the US Open, and seeing how she dealt with those things, those come from values that are instilled at a very early age, and understanding that you can be frustrated, you can be upset, but how do you maintain class and dignity and an acumen that will transpire and that you'll be known for, not only like in that moment, but that's your legacy, and that's how people come to recognize you.